It doesn't look like a creepy area, so it does fool people sometimes into thinking it's not a hot spot. But enough people, when they spend enough time in there, they're convinced, let's put it that way. The death that occurred in that area had to do with a guy named Officer William Stark. He worked on the ship, like I said, back in 1949. He was second senior officer on board. And one night he was going to have a drink with some of the other officers, and so he asked the captain's steward, like, do you know where there's any gin? The captain's steward remembers, oh, I saw this bottle of gin in the captain's room that he never seems to drink out of. He probably won't miss it. So he goes and he grabs it, he gives it to Officer Stark. Officer Stark makes out 3 drinks with some lime juice, and he's waiting for the other guys to arrive. And so he decides to get a little head start. He takes a shot of the liquid. Now, basically, as soon as he swallowed it, like, he immediately realized that was not gin. So he goes back to the captain's steward, and when you read the death report, which I have, Captain Stewart, the quote that he says from Officer Stark, he said, Officer Stark came up to me and he said, excuse me, would you please contact the medic for me? I believe I've just drank some sort of acid. So they contacted the medic and they also contacted the captain to find out what was in that gin bottle. Turns out the captain, he liked to keep some cleaning products handy and, you know, really good for cleaning wool, just in case he got little spots on his uniform or anything like that, is carbon tetrachloride. He didn't have apparently a good receptacle for it because he was keeping it in an unmarked gin bottle in his room. So carbon tetrachloride is what Officer Stark had drank. Now they, of course, immediately said, okay, well, let's pump your stomach, get that out of your system, right? But for some reason, Stark decided to just go to bed instead. He opted out of having his stomach pumped. What's likely what happened was that he felt like he had only had a little bit and he just didn't want to have to go through that pretty awful process of having his stomach pumped. But that probably would have saved his life. Instead, he succumbed to the poison the next day. People throughout the years up in that area have reported seeing the spirit of an officer. Now, they don't usually say, or ever say, as far as they know, I saw Officer Stark. It's just that the circumstances surrounding his death are what lead us to believe that when people report seeing an officer, or the captain, as they say, Stark is the one they're actually seeing. You know, the second senior officer, his uniform is going to look pretty similar to the captain's, to the untrained eye, right? Now, the number one area I like to recommend to people as far as the self-guided tour goes is the engine room. Has anybody had a chance to check out the engine room yet? Yep. A couple of you. So when we're done, I'll let you guys know the best way to get down there. Also, if you're taking the Steam and Steel tour, you'll end up down in that area, so you may just want to wait till after you take that tour. But if you go through the engine room, you'll find a bunch of doors that look a lot like this one. These were the big heavy hatch doors that were used to prevent the ship from sinking, right? If she hits something, if she starts taking on water, these things prevent the water from spreading. Now, you'll find one in particular down in that area where it doesn't say 38 right here, it says 13. Each one of these doors was numbered. And that is the legitimate number of the door that I'm about to tell you about. So back in 1966, only about a year before the ship stopped sailing, there was this one day where she was traveling through a pretty thick fog, and so as a precaution, which they would often do, they shut all the watertight doors just in case they hit something. On their readings up at the bridge on the controls for the watertight doors, they can see if any of them have been reopened locally. You would use the little lever right next to the door to reopen it. As soon as you let go of the lever, the door automatically closes again. So they can see that door 13 has been reopened. And so they're waiting and they're waiting and they're waiting and it's just not closing. So they made a call down to the engine room and they said, hey, what's going on with door 13? Why is it not closing? The guy who answered said, I don't know, I'll go check it out. He goes down to where the door is located and he finds that one of the ship's firemen, a young man named John, who was actually only 18 years old at the time, somehow he was standing in the doorway as it slid shut. These things would close with about 700 pounds of pressure per square inch. So it was his body that was physically preventing the door from closing all the way. Now, by the time they found him, they released him from the door. He was completely unconscious, but as far as they could tell, he was still alive at that point. He was pronounced dead by the time he got to the medical area. So we don't really know for sure exactly where he died, but one way or another, the area surrounding door 13 really be considered a hot spot. And the engine room in general. I mean, I can tell you personally, honestly, like in my time working here, anytime I've gone down into the engine room to like close the area for the night, turn off lights and stuff like that, be down there by myself, right? I've had some pretty weird things happen to me. Sometimes I'll just hear some weird noises off in the distance. A lot of times you just see a little movement out of the corner of your eye. But I've had doors close on me down there. I've heard disembodied voices down there. I've heard footsteps on the old walkways. I've had all kinds of experiences down in that area. I would say that that is where I personally have had the most personal experiences. I've personally never seen anything down there like what a lot of people have reported. A lot of people reported seeing an apparition that does seem to fit the description of the guy who was killed in that door. About 18 years old, black slick back hair, a little bit of a beard, wearing kind of grayish coveralls, like the uniform that they would have worn back in that time. Some people also say they'll feel somebody like tap them on the shoulder, on the back, and they don't see anybody, but later on they notice like marks in their clothing where it looks like whoever like tapped them had like grease on their hand or something like that, kind of like the grease that used to be all over the engines back then. Really weird stuff goes on down in that area. So when we're done, we'll let you guys know how to get down there and how to find door 13 specifically. If you're taking just a little further this way. And not the box itself, but what's inside the box. So some of you might be able to kind of see from where you're standing, there's actually a doll inside this box. Now, out of curiosity, is anybody a fan of the original version of the Twilight Zone, the old black and white version? Yeah. You might have seen an episode about a doll called Talkie Tina. And maybe you've seen The Simpsons Treehouse of Horror from back in the 90s where there's a Krusty doll trying to kill Homer Simpson. That's a direct parody of that Twilight Zone episode. So kind of an iconic episode. It went on to influence, Chucky and Annabelle, pretty much everything that came after it. The doll that's in this box, I'm not kidding you, was the inspiration for that Twilight Zone episode. So that episode was based on this doll. Now they changed certain details, but basically the doll belonged to this little girl, and her family started suspecting that it was haunted because the doll would move around the house randomly, like they would take it away from the little girl, it would end up back in other parts of the house. One day her stepmother tripped going down the stairs. In the episode, this happens to her father, played by Tully Savalas, but in real life it was her stepmother. And they found the doll on the stairs, and they suspected that maybe the doll actually tried to trick the stepmother to protect the little girl. Apparently, they didn't have a very good relationship. Now, it was so strongly believed at that point that this doll was possessed that somebody built this box around it, basically, to essentially imprison the doll so that it couldn't move around anymore, so it couldn't hurt anybody. Now, the thing is, the doll still has a little bit of room to move around inside the box. Sometimes we come in here and she's sitting just like she is now. There's a little seat inside the box. That's the state she's supposed to be in. But sometimes we come in here and she'll be standing with her face right against the window. Think about it. We're on an incline right now. How could she fall forward into the window, right? It doesn't make any sense. Now this was happening for a while. And some of the tour guides, we suspected a little bit. Maybe this was a big joke that Aiden was playing on us, to kind of trick us into thinking that this doll was possessed or something. Maybe when we're gone, he goes in and he actually can open the box. Says he can, but maybe he actually can, and maybe he's moving it. A few weeks ago, this would have been about 3 weeks ago now, I was bringing a tour in here during the day. And actually, he just recently moved this area around a little bit, so this box was kind of in the corner over here. And I brought my group in. I look over at the box as I'm gathering everybody inside. She's sitting, like she often is. Gathering everybody in, I start telling them about the room, and then it gets to the part where we're supposed to talk about the box. And I turn around and look at her, and in the 60 seconds maybe that I've taken my eyes off of her, she has moved. She has stood up, and now her face is right against the window. There was no way anybody could have stuck by me in that 60 seconds that I took my eyes off of her, I should say. So let's just say I became a little more convinced at that point. You can imagine my group's reaction as I'm just now standing there like staring at this, like, I haven't told them anything about the doll yet. I'm just standing there like an idiot just staring at it. And they're like, what's going on? It was like trying to convince them, no, I swear, 2 seconds ago she was sitting, I swear. Continue, I wanted to mention the next area we're going to be heading into. This is that spot where I really want to emphasize, be very careful, really watch your step. The staircase to take us down into this area, it's short, but it is kind of steep. So, take your time going down these stairs. Any questions before we continue? Now, this story I want to tell you guys about, this is one of those that I can't really say 100% that this was a paranormal experience, of course. So just kind of take it how you will, interpret it how you will. But basically, About 5 years ago, I was down here doing one of the really late night tours, about 10:30 at night while we were down here. It was a pretty quiet night on the ship. And while we were in that area, we at one point heard this really loud like bang, like this slam or something like that. And we couldn't tell like where exactly it had come from, so we kind of stopped and we listened a little bit, didn't hear anything else, whatever, just kind of kept going. Then when we're getting ready to leave, like we're coming out the way we just were, except we're heading all the way out, and I get to the bottom of the staircase here, and I look up, and I see that the door at the top of the stairs is shut. Now the door at the top of the stairs right now is shut, but that's because it's a different door than it used to be. Right now the door that's there, it automatically closes, and it opens from both sides. The door that used to be there didn't automatically close. It actually stayed open at all times. It actually opened this way rather than the other way. And the reason it stayed open at all times is because it couldn't open from this side. So if it shut on you while you were down here, you were trapped. So I look up, I see the door, and I realize what that loud thud was, what that loud bang was. Now, the thing is, I didn't know that that door didn't open from that side until that very moment. That was how I found out. I look up and the door is just blank. There's no knob or handle or anything on it. Like, you know when you just walk by a door that's open every single day of your life, you just stop thinking about it at a certain point, right? So luckily, I had one of these on me, and it was charged, just like it is now. And so I called security, and I basically just kind of tried to explain to them what had happened, like as quickly as I could. Like they didn't get it. They were like, I don't understand. Like, where are you? Why do you need us? They didn't even know that the door didn't open from this side. Like nobody knew somehow. And that was not an original door, so we never were able to figure out exactly why somebody put it in that way. But the thing was, you know, you might be thinking, well, anybody can come and close a door, right? Here's a couple reasons why this is kind of peculiar. For one thing, back then we didn't have the magic show up there, so that just used to be storage space. There weren't very many people who even knew about this area, let alone could get back here. You had to go through two completely separate locked doors back then just to get to this door. So it would have had to have been somebody with keys. In other words, it would have had to be a member of our staff. The only members of our staff who were left on the ship that night who could even access this area were whoever the tour guide on duty was, me, and whoever the security guard who was actually patrolling the ship. There were two security guards. One was down by the entrance and one was patrolling the ship. And so when I called security, they sent the one who was patrolling the ship to come let me out. It took him about 15 minutes to come down here because he was all the way down at the other end of the ship when this happened. So he was nowhere near us. When he came down, he told me like all the doors were locked coming in. There was no way anybody could have just snuck back here and shut that door. And even if somebody could, like why would they even do that, right? It just, none of it made any sense. I've never been able to find a reasonable explanation for what happened or who could have closed that door. Since then, they have replaced that door, so it does open from both sides, at the behest of the tour guides, as you can imagine. Still, just to be safe, I always make sure I've got one of these on me at all times, right?